subscribe.
When Nipper Reed hauled the twins from their beds on the 9th of May, their power was by no means over, and the police were taking a considerable gamble. Thanks largely to Alan Cooper, there was sufficient evidence about the crossbow and the murder suitcase to keep the twins and the firm in prison on remand, and to make sure that they came to trial before a magistrate. That was all. The police possessed no proof of murder yet. Much of the existing evidence connecting them with the bond deals and frauds was complex and obscure, while Cooper on his own was a distinctly shaky witness for a major trial. Nobody needed to tell Nipper Reed what this meant. On the existing evidence, the twins might get 5 years apiece if the police were lucky, and if they weren't, there was nothing to prevent them repeating their performance at the McGowan trial and once again emerging from the court scot-free. Recognizing this, the police began the last and crucial stage of their investigation. They had the few weeks before the preliminary hearings now to clinch their case and get their major witnesses to talk. They knew who they were, but had to be able to guarantee that this time the twins were finished. Otherwise, as one old Cockney put it, if people talk to the police and the twins get off again, they'll have to send the plague carts into Bethnal Green and shout, "Bring out your dead." With so much at stake, the police meant business. A top Scotland Yard detective had said they were determined that the Krays and all they stand for shall be driven into the ground. To do this, the Yard was finally prepared to use its full resources, and the investigation had the highest backing. Through contacts in the underworld, warnings were sent out that the police would tolerate no nonsense on the Krays' behalf from other criminals. Witnesses were offered around-the-clock protection. The police were all set to crack the Kray twins' wall of silence and challenge time-honored myths of East End villainy, the idea that EastEnders never grasped that there would be a terrible revenge on those that did, and that the police were a common enemy. Their task would not be easy, and at this stage, the twins appeared confident and in high spirits. Since their arrest, they were both in Brixton prison, but even here there was a lot that they could do. As technically they were still innocent, they had more privileges than other prisoners. They wore their own clothes and could have alcohol and cigarettes and food brought in from outside. This helped to keep up their morale and, more important still, they were both allowed as many visitors and letters as they wanted. As a result, the two of them maintained something of a court in Brixton. They were star prisoners. The warders treated them with definite respect, and the twins managed to make sure that everything was done to make it seem that they were still at the center of a rich, influential world. Most days Violet would organize cold chicken dinners and a glass of wine for them and for the other members of the firm. Actors and pop singers wrote to them, boxers and film producers came to visit them, and all the time the twins seemed calm and unconcerned about the future. Although the key members of the firm were nearly all in prison too, there were enough old friends visiting Brixton to ensure that their messages were circulated around the East End. Soon the twins' confident demeanor seemed to be having its effect. "The law may think they're clever," said one old lag who visited them, "but those twins can still run bloody circles around them. You'll see, the twins have got so many strings to pull, so many important people they can ruin, that in the end, you'll find that Scotland Yard won't dare go on with it." The twins have had their plans in readiness for years. In 3 months they'll be back amongst us, and they'll remember who their friends were, mark my words. There seemed a chance that he was right. Why else should the twins appear so cheerful at a time like this? For most of May, people in Bethnal Green who knew them seemed to be waiting to see which way things would go. There were a lot of rumors naturally, most of them in favor of the twins. From Brixton, they were hard at work directing what they called their propaganda war against the enemy. But before long there were clearer indications that the Krays were losing their last battle. For some time one of their strongest cards had been the presence of two of the most powerful members of the firm at liberty. Their young cousin, Ronnie Hart, and Scotch Ian Barry, who was with Ronnie when Cornell was murdered, had both escaped the 6 a.m. arrests on the 9th of May. Both were considered dangerous men, and knowledge that they were free must have scared many of Nipper Reed's potential witnesses. There was a strong rumor that the twins had specially arranged for them to avoid arrest so that they could guard their interests. They were reported to be armed and in constant touch with Brixton. Hart was the first to go. The police found him hiding miserably with his girlfriend in a caravan. He confessed everything without a struggle. Then a few days later Barry was spotted in the East End. He was drunk, broke and lost without the twins. Like Hart, he put up no resistance. With these last members of the firm in jail, the idea of the twins' reprisal force was quietly forgotten. People also began to doubt the existence of the emergency plans the twins had always said they had prepared for their arrest. Criminals are realists. During these first few weeks after the twins' arrest, the con men, club owners, and racketeers who had provided their regular income had prudently been honoring old arrangements. Now they were forgetting them. So were the wealthy businessmen with whom the twins had banked their money for emergencies like this. The vast amounts of money that the twins had taken had been squandered. Nothing was in reserve. The house in Suffolk was made ready to be sold, and then came the ultimate indignity. The twins applied for legal aid for their defense. When the trial opened on the 6th of July, it began before the Metropolitan Chief Magistrate at Old Street, Mr. Frank Milton. Legally, the purpose of this preliminary hearing was to discover if there was a case for the twins to answer at a superior court. But both the twins and the police were set to make these hearings something of a demonstration from the start. For the police, this took the form of an amassed show of force reminiscent of the precautions the Italian carabinieri mount for an important mafia trial in Palermo. The court was in a state of siege, with police everywhere. Witnesses were closely guarded and produced in court from secret hideouts. The twins and their supporters were whisked straight from prison in a high-speed convoy, guarded by outriders and an elite task force of police. It was a complement of a sort to the legend of their power. The police were treating them like a hostile force still capable of challenging the state. In response to this, the twins decided they would waive the traditional ban on reporting from these preliminary hearings. It was a gesture. "We want the world to see the diabolical liberties the law's been taking," Reggie said. They also wanted their publicity. Once the case started, it would soon be clear that they did not have much else. The driving of the Krays into the ground had started. Nipper had gone to town, and the twins soon knew it. Set-faced, unsmiling in the front row of the dock, they found themselves up against something they had never faced before: denunciations from their former friends who had gone over to the enemy. One of the very earliest was a man called Billy Exley, one-time lightweight boxer, thief, and bodyguard of Ronnie's. His abrupt appearance in court was carefully stage-managed and most dramatic. The twins had no idea that he had turned against them. As far as they knew, he had stayed loyal. Before he appeared in the dock, the prosecution had announced that the next witness was suffering from an acute heart condition. A chair was placed for him, also a microphone. Finally in shuffled Exley, looking deathly pale. The twins watched him stony-faced, and in the hush that filled the court, Exley began his evidence on how he used to run their long-firm frauds. But his appearance meant much more than what he had to say about the frauds. He seemed to speak with difficulty. The court was warned that he might drop dead any moment, so that his words came like the voice of conscience from the tomb. It seemed a dreadful thing that a man like Exley should feel the need to recant before he died and name his former friends as evil men. What must have shocked the twins was the thought of all their other secrets he could reveal to the law. Exley knew the truth about Cornell. Exley was the man who stayed on guard at Valence Road armed with a shotgun on the night of the murder. Exley had helped to guard Frank Mitchell. If the police had him on their side, they must already know far more than had seemed possible when the case opened. But the police had more than Exley, and in the days that followed it was quite clear that the Krays wall of silence had collapsed. Forgotten victims and former accomplices made their appearance in the witness box. The underworld was talking. From this point on, the twins knew there were no secrets they could count on keeping. Most dangerous of all for them was the surprise appearance of the frightened barmaid from the blind beggar. Previously, she had failed to identify Ronnie on the identity parade held after Cornell's death. Since then, Superintendent Harry Mooney had won her confidence and managed to convince her that she had nothing to fear from telling what she saw on the night of the killing. Now in the witness box, she claimed that the twins had scared her into silence, but in fact, she clearly recognized Ronnie and Ian Barry as the men who fired the shots. This was the real turning point in the trial. Until now, the twins still had a slender chance that the key witnesses might hold back. Now it was clear that the police had all the evidence required to destroy them. The only questions now were how much more the police investigations would reveal, and whether the twins could produce any surprises in their defense. Their trial at the Old Bailey started in the new year of 1969 and was to prove the longest, most expensive criminal trial in British history. By now the situation was quite different from the early days of the twins' arrest. The police had done their work, the case against them was complete. The twins had changed during the 8 months that they had spent in Brixton on remand. The optimistic messages had ceased and both of them seemed quietly resigned to a long spell in prison. They were already turning their attention to their return to freedom sometime in middle age, and for both of them, the idea of crime was over. Reggie's dream meant marrying Christine and starting a family somewhere in the country. Ronnie for once appeared more practical. I'll have grey hair by then, but grey's distinguished on a man. There'll be a spot of money still around and I'll find myself a nice boy and sail off around the world with him. There's still a lot I want to see and do with my life. In the meantime, there was the trial to think about, and the twins seemed far more concerned with the appearance they made than with mere details of defense. Since they believed the outcome was now more or less decided, they would concentrate on the impression they would leave posterity. This was the moment when they sealed their myth. What they wanted was to be remembered as the great undefeated heavyweights of crime. The attitude of the police towards the trial was not dissimilar, and like the twins, they also wanted it to be something of a demonstration, in their case of the power of the law, a full-scale warning against all future violent gangsters. This explains much of what happened during the long weeks ahead in Number 1 Court. The first case to be heard consisted of a double murder, the Cornell and the McVitie killings treated as one. Reggie was accused as an accessory to the Cornell crime for knowingly helping Ronnie after his escape. And although Reggie was accused of killing McVitie with his brother's help, there was a group of other alleged accessories with them in the dock. Bender and the Lambriana brothers, young Tony Barry, who was charged with bringing round the gun from the Regency, the twins' brother Charlie Kray and his friend Frederick Foreman, both of them charged with getting rid of Jack McVitie's body. But from the moment the accused filed into the cage-like dock of the Old Bailey, their greatest worry must have been over the two men who were no longer with them, Scotch Jack Dixon, who had driven Ronnie to the blind beggar, and the twins' cousin, Ronnie Hart. Nipper Reed had done his work efficiently. Dixon and Hart had both gone over to the other side and turned Queen's evidence. Both were to be the major witnesses for the police. It was a long trial with little subtlety. The judge was Mr. Melford Stevenson, a brisk old gentleman with a reputation as something of a hard judge. From the beginning, he was concise and concerned with facts. The prosecuting counsel, Mr. Kenneth Jones QC, was a plump sonorous Welshman somewhat afflicted, as he put it, with a want of height. Like both the judge and the police, his main concern appeared to be with facts, although he was not above a certain lumbering theatricality to drive home the full horror of the evidence. Gentlemen of the jury, think for a moment of the terrifying and horrifying effrontery of this deed. Two men can walk into a public house on any evening and there in cold blood kill another human being. You may well ask who within striking distance would be safe. Who would come before the court and have the courage to say who the killers were? Cornell's companions took to their heels, but I will bring before you the barmaid, and she will tell you that she recognizes the killer of George Cornell. The greater the horror and the melodrama, the more it suited Ronnie. Shooting Cornell had been the greatest moment of his life. He felt that he was justified, and here it was being publicly acknowledged. This was almost fame enough. All that the defense could do was to attack witnesses. Ronnie enjoyed this too, for these were all people that he hated. They had betrayed him. So, Mr. Hart, you admit that you have given all this evidence to save your own skin. Not to save my skin, but because I thought it right. Just the same, because you thought it right, you have saved yourself from sitting in the dock beside the men you are accusing. Answer me please, Mr. Hart. This sort of sniping could go on forever. At times it seemed as if it would. When all the trials ended, 28 criminals had been allowed to save themselves by giving evidence against the twins. Often it was hard to know which was the more nauseating, the crime or the action of the man denouncing it. All these turncoats in the witness box spoke vehemently against the twins. They had to justify themselves and had a bigger stake than anyone in seeing that their former friends were put away forever. What Nipper Reed had told the lawyers at New Scotland Yard more than a year before was proving quite correct. The twins, it seemed, could be condemned only with the help of other criminals' evidence. Such criminals could be shown up for what they were, but could not be entirely discredited. The defense was led by John Platsmills QC for Ronnie. Paul Wrightson QC appeared for Reggie. Much of their time and energy in court were spent attacking witnesses and impugning the methods of the police, without conspicuous success. This trial was shedding little luster on the law, but Nipper and his men appeared to have worked scrupulously down in their sewers. It was a dirty business, but the essential facts could not be challenged. Beyond this there seemed no complex plan of defense, only this endless war of somnolent attrition, with the twins at the center of it all, becoming less credible with every day that passed. Ronnie made one unforgettable appearance in the witness box as the case neared its end. People who knew him understood that this was the moment he had been waiting for, and there was speculation over what would happen. If the twins really had some secrets up their sleeves, now was the moment they would have to use it. Now was the time to mention all those public figures he used to threaten to expose. It was also the point where he might have tried to put his own case forward, or at least attempt to enlist some public sympathy. None of this was what he wanted. It would have seemed petty to give trouble to the various celebrities he could have named as his friends, or to have stirred up scandals now. It would have been easy, but this wasn't how he wished to be remembered. Nor did he want the straight world's sympathy, still less its understanding. He was a criminal and would act like one. He was immaculately dressed, the usual dark blue suit, white shirt, and tightly knotted tie. He also wore his gold-rimmed spectacles. These made him look extraordinarily sinister. His face showed no emotion as he began answering his counsel's questions. His voice, too, was expressionless and flat, and he seemed short of breath. But soon he began to dominate the court. He denied everything alleged against him. He and Cornell were friends. He never even entered the Blind Beggar on the night of the 8th of March, 1966. After the mass of prosecution evidence, there was a calm effrontery about anyone who could lie on such a scale, and it was not done meekly or apologetically, but with an undiminished hatred for all who stood against him. This hatred was a sort of pride. After the indignities of his defeat, the betrayals of his followers, he was admitting nothing and regretting nothing. If people said he was a murderer, let them prove it. Under the cross-examination of the prosecution, he became still more confident. This was presumably just what the prosecution wanted, for there was something in his manner that confirmed everything the court had heard against him. He was crude, sneering, violent, but at the same time he was trying to present the public self that he aspired to, arrogant and unconcerned, denying everything, friend of the famous, benefactor of the poor and victim of the police. What made the trial so strange was that this public figure of the twins was all that anybody saw or mentioned. There were a few occasions when just a glimmer of their real selves broke through, usually in anger when they lost control. Ronnie beside himself with rage, calling the prosecuting counsel "you fat slob" because the police had confiscated his grandparents' pension books. Reggie yelling that the police were scum for daring to intrude at Francis's funeral.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.